No one expected the nun to walk in wearing sunglasses. The audience at the Late Show with Stephen Colbert was already buzzing, the lights had dimmed, the band was playing a funkier-than-usual intro, and Colbert himself had just teased a guest unlike any we've ever had. People were expecting a politician, maybe a surprise celebrity cameo. What they got instead was a woman in a black habit, white veil, and Ray-Bans, striding onto the stage like she'd just left a Tarantino film. Stephen rose to greet her, caught slightly off guard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, eyebrows arched in amusement, "please welcome Sister Karoline Leavitt." She took her seat with a quiet confidence that shook the room more than any thunderous entrance could. Her hands were folded, but her smirk said she came prepared to destroy. Colbert shuffled his question cards. "Tell me, sister," he began with a grin, "what made you decide to bring holiness to late-night TV?" Sister Karoline tilted her head, removed her sunglasses slowly, and looked him dead in the eye. "I go where the sins are loudest." The audience howled. Colbert chuckled, nervously. He didn't know it yet, but he had just become a guest on his own show. Stephen leaned back in his chair, still wearing that playful smirk, the one he used to disarm senators and billionaires. But Sister Karoline didn't flinch. Her eyes were sharp, her posture impeccable. She wasn't here to be disarmed. He flipped to the next card on his desk. "So, sister," he said, elongating the pause, "word is, you once walked out of a Vatican Council meeting in the middle of a cardinal's speech. Care to explain?" The audience let out a low "oh," like a wave of schoolkids smelling drama in the air. Sister Karoline's smile didn't fade, but her tone dropped just enough to signal, this wasn't going to be a joke. "I didn't walk out," she said calmly. "I was escorted out. There's a difference." Colbert blinked. The audience fell silent. He hadn't expected that. "Why?" he asked, voice softening. She rested her elbows on the armrests and looked out at the crowd, not the cameras, not Stephen, but the people. Her voice lowered. "Because I told them truth doesn't ask for permission," she said. "And because I said something that made the room very, very, uncomfortable." "What did you say?" he asked, half whispering now. She turned back to him and leaned in. "I said God has a sense of humor, and it looks a lot like this show." The crowd burst into laughter, but Colbert didn't laugh this time. He stared at her, not with irony, but with something closer to respect. Or maybe concern. "Okay," he said, clearly trying to recover. "Let's lighten the mood. You ever do stand-up?" She nodded. "Once. At a prison in Nevada. I opened for a magician." "You opened for a magician, in prison?" he asked, incredulous. She raised an eyebrow. "Yes. And let's just say, I disappeared him." The audience roared again. The studio lights gleamed brighter now, almost too bright, as if the room itself was leaning in to listen. Colbert was sweating. Not from heat, but from the creeping realization that Sister Karoline was stealing the show with ease. Then she looked at him, more serious now. "You know, Stephen," she said slowly, "the real reason I came here tonight isn't to entertain." He froze. "What is it then?" She looked directly into the camera. "To warn you." Colbert blinked. "To warn me?" His laugh was half-hearted this time, more habit than humor. Even the band behind him had quieted, unsure whether to punctuate the moment or let it hang. They chose silence. Sister Karoline folded her hands in her lap again, like a Sunday school teacher about to deliver a lesson no one wanted but everyone needed. "I had a dream," she said. 3 nights ago." Colbert opened his mouth to respond, joke, deflect, something, but his earpiece crackled just as he started to speak. He winced. In the control room, behind the scenes, static bled across every monitor for a split second before the feed returned. The director cursed quietly, tapping his headset. Back on stage, Sister Karoline continued. I was standing in a burning theater. Empty seats. Smoke in the rafters. And you were at the center of the stage, telling jokes to no one. Laughter rippled uneasily through the audience. They weren't sure if it was a setup or a metaphor. Then, she said, the lights above you started falling. One by one. And someone, something, was watching from the shadows. Colbert tilted his head, trying to stay in control. Wow, he said, attempting levity. That's the creepiest Yelp review I've ever gotten. She smiled, just slightly. But her eyes remained cold. I'm not here to scare you, Stephen, she said. I'm here because I think you're already scared. Of what comes after the laugh track ends. The audience was silent now. Not tense, invested. The air felt charged. Back in the control room, the screens flickered again. Just for a moment, one of the camera feeds went black, then returned, but the frame had shifted. Sister Karoline was still seated. But the monitor showed her staring directly into the lens, unmoving. Almost like she knew. Colbert glanced around. Okay, he said, trying to recenter the room. Sister Karoline, I gotta be honest, I didn't expect prophetic nightmares to be on the docket tonight. She tilted her head, like a hawk studying its prey. There's more, she said. But you won't believe it, until it starts happening. Colbert leaned forward. Happening to me? She didn't answer. A single overhead light flickered above the stage. Colbert tried to shake it off. He'd faced bombastic politicians, walked through live monologues during studio blackouts, even hosted in a pandemic. But this? This was new. This was uncomfortable. Not in the political satire way, in the personal way. He straightened his cards with sudden precision. So, he said, voice tight but trying to be warm, Sister Karoline, you've clearly had vivid dreams. What do you say to people who think it's all just metaphor? Symbolic stuff. She didn't respond immediately. She just looked at him, really looked at him, like she was seeing more than just a late-night host in a tailored suit. Stephen, she said softly, do you remember the joke you almost told on October 14, 2019? He froze. The air in the room shifted. No one clapped. No one laughed. Even the crew behind the cameras leaned closer. Colbert's smile faded. That was, during rehearsal, he said slowly. We cut it. She nodded. You didn't cut it. You couldn't say it. Colbert blinked. The silence was thunderous. That joke had haunted him. He'd written it in a rush, a strange, biting little riff about dreams, masks, and the things we pretend not to see. It had nothing to do with the headlines of the day. It felt like it came from somewhere else. Even his writers looked at him weird when he read it out loud. He never told it again. It had felt wrong. How do you know about that? He asked. Karoline leaned in, just an inch. Because I wrote the same joke, she said. 10 years earlier. In a journal I burned. The audience let out an audible gasp. Some laughed nervously, but most stayed frozen, unsure what kind of show this had become. In the control room, more static. One camera feed glitched again, this time with a single frame of something else. Something not in the studio. A dark hallway. A flickering sign that read, applause. Gone in an instant. Colbert shook his head, now visibly uneasy. Okay, he said. This is getting real Twilight Zone. Are we being punked? Is this a religious prank? Sister Karoline sat back. I told you, she said, almost kindly now. I came to warn you. But I'm not the only one who dreamed that joke. The light above the audience dimmed. A soft buzz could be heard, like an old radio tuning in. And then Colbert whispered, barely audible. I never told anyone about that joke. For the first time in the interview, Stephen Colbert didn't have a comeback. He sat there, fingers pressed lightly against his lips, eyes flickering with something far from his usual on-camera spark. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was recognition. Like a part of him was waking up, one he deliberately kept asleep. The audience sensed it too. You could feel it in the way no one shifted in their seats. No coughs. No rustling. Just breath held. Colbert leaned forward. I don't remember telling anyone about that joke. Not even my head writer. Karoline nodded. You didn't. But I remember writing it. Word for word. On a flight from Istanbul to Rome. Seat 14C. Stephen's jaw tensed. That was the same seat he'd sat in 6 months before the Late Show hired him. Same airline. Same route. He remembered because it was the night he first asked himself, what if I'm not supposed to be doing this anymore? He laughed nervously. Okay, sister, now I need to know, are you a nun, a psychic, or a hacker? Karoline didn't blink. None of those. I'm something much simpler. I'm someone who saw the smoke before the fire. She reached into her sleeve, not dramatically, but with the casual ease of someone who didn't need theatrics. What she pulled out made Colbert's heart actually skip, a scorched, yellowed page. Torn along the edge. Ash at the corners. She handed it to him. He took it with shaking hands. There it was, his joke. Written in his style. The exact rhythm. The setup, the pause, the twist. Word for word. At the bottom of the page, just one sentence in different handwriting. You're not the only voice in your head. Colbert stared at it. Then back at her. What is this? He asked, his voice low. Karoline exhaled, not in frustration, but in relief. Like she'd finally reached the moment she came for. It's the page I thought I burned, she said. But it survived. Just like you. The studio lights above them flickered once, twice, then held. In the control room, a red warning flashed across the feed monitors. Camera 3, source unknown. The director barked, who the hell patched in external footage? No one answered. Because no one had. Back on set, Colbert stood up. The card in his hand was trembling slightly. You know what this feels like, he said, half to her, half to the void. Karoline looked up at him. A turning point. The audience never noticed it at first. The lights dipped, the band launched into a jazzy transition, and the big screen behind Colbert's desk flashed the familiar blue. The Late Show will be right back. People clapped out of instinct. Stagehands moved. Cameras drifted away from the host's desk. It looked like a normal break. But the feed didn't cut. Somewhere in broadcast land, homes across the country kept watching. The band music faded. The fake commercial screen dissolved. And the viewers, now tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, saw something they were never supposed to. Stephen Colbert standing, still holding the scorched joke. Sister Karoline seated, watching him not like a guest, but like a witness. He looked dazed. This doesn't make sense, he said, more to himself than anyone else. It's just a joke. It's just words. Why do they keep coming back? Karoline tilted her head gently. Because words aren't just words when you bury them. He looked at her sharply. What do you mean? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pointed to the studio teleprompter, still faintly glowing even during the break. Stephen followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. The prompter was still rolling, even though no one was operating it. The text on the screen wasn't from the script. It wasn't even in the right font. And he recognized it instantly. It was a monologue he wrote, and deleted, 5 years ago. Never aired. Never shared. Too dark. Too raw. Too true. He whispered the first line aloud. What if the mask I wear isn't for the audience, but for the mirror? Karoline rose from her chair. That's the second page, she said. It started appearing all over the world. In dreams. On receipts. Carved into benches. Typed into comment sections by people who swore they didn't write it. Colbert staggered back slightly, the card dropping from his hand. You're telling me, this is bigger than me? Karoline nodded once. It was never about you, Stephen. It was about what you carry. You make people laugh so they don't have to look at it. But you feel it. Every night. And the page knows. Suddenly, the house lights surged, blinding, and then blacked out completely. Gasps echoed from the audience. For a full 7 seconds, the studio was in total darkness. And when the emergency lights flickered on, Karoline was gone. The chair sat empty. No one had seen her leave. Just the scorched page resting on Colbert's desk, the handwriting still fresh. The studio never fully recovered from the blackout. When the lights came back, everything looked normal, technically. The cameras were online. The audience was murmuring, unsettled but unsure why. Stephen was standing alone behind his desk, blinking like he'd just woken from a dream. But the air was different. He looked at the empty chair across from him, where Sister Karoline Leavitt had been just moments ago, and for a second, just a split second, he considered walking off set. Not out of fear. Out of understanding. But instead, he picked up the scorched page. The studio director's voice crackled through the earpiece. Stephen, we're back in 30 seconds. We're rolling. Just keep it light. He didn't respond. 20 seconds. He stared at the audience, at their unsure smiles, their phones held low, their eyes darting between him and the mysterious chair. Some of them were whispering. A few were filming. 15 seconds. In the control room, someone noticed that camera 3, the one that glitched earlier, was now slowly zooming in on Stephen. No one had touched the controls. 10 seconds. Stephen looked at the prompter. The old monologue was gone. Replaced with a single line. Tell the joke. He looked back at the card in his hand. 5 seconds. He placed it gently on the desk. Took a breath. 3. 2. 1. Live. He looked directly into the camera. The audience quieted. Even the band stopped fidgeting. And Stephen Colbert, with none of his usual inflection, none of the polish, just voice, just breath, said the line that had haunted him for 5 years. I once dreamed I was telling jokes to an empty room. And the only person laughing was wearing my face. Silence. Not confusion. Not discomfort. Just stillness. Somewhere, a phone dropped to the floor. Somewhere else, miles away, a viewer watching alone in their apartment laughed out loud without meaning to. And then covered their mouth. And then began to cry. Because they knew that joke. They'd heard it before. Not on TV. Not in a podcast. In a dream. Years ago. On set, Stephen stood still. The audience began to clap, uncertain but loyal. But he didn't smile. He looked back at the chair where Karoline had sat, then up into the rafters. And for the briefest moment, only visible on camera 3, a shadow passed behind the stage screen, tall, thin, watching. The feed cut to commercial. But this time, no one was sure if it ever came back. The show ended like any other. A few final notes from the band, some polite clapping from an audience that wasn't sure what they'd just witnessed, and Colbert's usual sign-off, though this time it lacked its usual spark. He didn't crack a joke. Didn't even say, "Good night." Just a quiet, almost whispered, "We'll be back tomorrow, maybe." He left the stage before the applause died down. Backstage, the crew avoided eye contact. The producer tried to catch his attention with a clipboard full of next week's bookings, but Colbert brushed past him like a man walking through fog. In the hallway outside his dressing room, someone had slipped an envelope under the door. No name. No markings. No return address. Just an old-fashioned wax seal pressed with a symbol he didn't recognize, a closed eye, upside down. He stared at it for a while. Part of him didn't want to touch it. But he did. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed. Neat. Centered. Like a page from an old playbill. The second joke. A man walks into a room and forgets why he entered. Everyone else remembers. So they wait. Do not read this aloud. Stephen looked at it. Read it again. Then read it again, silently, lips barely moving. And in that moment, the hallway around him went quiet. Like someone had sucked the sound out of the building. No footsteps. No humming lights. Even the vending machine near the writer's room stopped buzzing. Then, a knock at the door. 3 slow taps. He turned the handle. The hallway was empty. Except for the chair. The same one Sister Karoline had sat in on stage. Placed there. Facing him. As if someone, or something, wanted him to sit. Inside his dressing room, the TV clicked on by itself. No show. No menu. Just static. Then, a voice. His own. Softer. Younger. Uneasy. "I thought it was just a joke, but it's the only thing that remembers me." Colbert stumbled back, heart pounding. The letter in his hand was gone. In its place, the burned page. Back again. Still warm.